Hey, good morning. I am, I wouldn't say excited to make this video, but I am blessed to make this video. Um, I've always wanted some way to share bits of this story with the world, or just share stories with the world in general. But this story in particular is very special to me. I don't go into the ins and outs and details of my aunt's life. If I were gonna make a video on her life, it would probably be like a very long video, like a Lord of the Rings trilogy, if you will. This is just a snippet of her story that is more focused on my personal journey with grappling with how her life ended and the way the Lord spoke to me about that. And um like I say in my other videos, like this is only to encourage. And I titled this video what I would say to Theo Vaughn or anyone else um on the fence about surrendering to Jesus. And it's because I think that what's missing online in these conversations when these creators or these people with these enormous platforms talk about their faith journey is that one, people rush to the comment section to be like, whatever, criticism, whatever. They're encouraged at first, but the moment that person backslides or has a moment where they struggle, then those same people are back in the comment section, super disappointed, shame, 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 thrown around like confetti. And my personal belief is that as a community, I feel that we could come together and make more of a difference with telling our own stories and just relating to one another in the way that one, God's shown up in our life, but also the way that we've experienced life, because life is so difficult. And if you've seen any of Theo Vaughn's videos, he talks a lot about, or I don't know about a lot, but he's talked several times about his childhood and his relationship with his mom and how hard that's been for him. And on some human level, like, can't we all relate to a degree? Like, we haven't all been through the same things, but we all have been through something that is really hard and has been very hard for us. Whether it be a little T trauma, big T trauma, we've all been through something. And I think that as a community, it would be beautiful to see us all come together and share our own stories and encourage each other that way. So this is my attempt at doing that. Um, and I hope you enjoy this video. I hope you're encouraged. And I just wanted to put a disclaimer and a trigger warning that I do talk about mental illness and homelessness. And so if that is something that is too hard to listen to at this time in your life, feel free to just not watch this video. But I hope you enjoy it, and thanks for being here. My aunt spent time, a good portion of time, living on the street, and for much of that time we didn't know where she was. We looked for her. At times we did know where she was, and it was really hard to get her help, because if you've ever had a loved one who's mentally ill, oftentimes the freedoms that those people are afforded sometimes could be a barrier to getting them the help they need. And so my aunt just was not in her right mind. But towards the end of her life, she was completely somewhere else mentally. And yeah, it was hard to get her help, because in her world she didn't need help, and she was okay, and she wasn't an immediate threat to herself or to somebody else. And if you're not in a situation where they are going to harm themselves or somebody else, and they are saying that that is what's going on, or you can see that they're, taking action, there's really not much you can do as a family member to get them the mental health care that they need. And so I remember one of the more painful things for us as a family was driving, out of the neighborhood and seeing her homeless, seeing her in our town where we lived, living on the street. She was a person who took such immaculate care of herself when she wasn't yet ill. I'm talking like skincare routine, regularly giving herself pedicures and manicures, always had her hair done and her makeup done, and always took a lot of pride in her appearance. And that was one thing that faded in her mental illness. She was, her skin was really weathered from being in the sun. Her hair was, unkept, and her hygiene was suffering, and she was exposed to the elements and looking worn. And driving by a homeless person on the side of the road has, been forever changed for me after that experience, because every once in a while when I see somebody homeless on the side of the road, I'm reminded that somebody loves that person. Somebody loves that person and does not want them there. And maybe that's not always the case. Maybe that person doesn't have anybody left. I've heard plenty of stories online of homeless people who their whole family passed away and they have nothing. But there are many people living on the street who have full-on families that are doing everything in their power to help them. And there's just nothing they can do. Nothing they can do. And it's so hard. It's so hard. And she, went seasons of life where we knew her, seasons of this time where we knew where she was, and it was at least a relief to see that she was alive and she was safe. But there are other seasons where we didn't even know where she was. She disappeared at a time to Birmingham, Alabama. We're not even really sure how she got there. I'm not sure. Maybe some other people in my family know. I don't know. I think she got money somehow and she got on a train, I think, and ended up in Birmingham, Alabama, where she ended up at a halfway house, I think it was, or a recovery center. And in that recovery center, they did not really know what to do with her because she wasn't really in need of recovery from substances. And her stories that they gave her were just not real. She said she was in the military. She said she had 12 children. There's a lot of things that she said that just weren't real or true. And it made it hard for them to help her. And eventually she requested multiple times for help to get back to California. And eventually this recovery center bought her a one-way train bus ticket to California. And this would ultimately be, the last journey she would take, because she never made it to her destination. She made it to one of her stops in California. I believe it was her end destination was Anaheim. Sorry, there's a bird. I don't know if you hear that bird, but nothing I can do about that bird. And I think it was Gardena. like a suburb of LA, that she ended up in. And she made it to the bus stop, and she never made it back on her next bus. She passed away at that bus stop. And what an incredible gift it was, that the Lord provided some closure by, I actually posted in a Facebook group, a community group for that city. And I said, was anybody there? Did anybody see her or interact with her? And there was actually a few people who testified to seeing her on their drive to work every day, and not having recognized her as being like, somebody who's typically at that bus stop. But she sat at that bus stop for days, I think. And I think her mind must have just been in such a state of confusion. She was covered in a blanket, and it was really hot outside. Like, it was in the middle of summer, a heat wave in Southern California, and she was covered with a blanket, which struck many people as odd. And one person said that they had stopped to ask if she was okay, and she said she was fine. And they left her a meal, and wow, to think of the kindness of a stranger to offer to feed her, or we had no idea where she was. And yeah, that always strikes me. But she didn't eat, and she eventually collapsed and passed away. And a nurse who was driving by stopped her car and stayed with her until she could be taken by the first responders. And we know her cause of death. We don't know exactly why that happened. Ultimately, her heart, I think she had a heart attack, was what ultimately took her. But I remember in therapy, I was talking about this with my therapist some years ago, shortly after it happened. And I kept going back to this point of how she lost her life. And I had kind of become fixated on it. And my therapist pointed out, hey, like, you seem to be kind of fixated on like how she passed away, like how it happened. And I shared with her, well, the reason why I'm fixated on it is because I was looking for her. And this whole time, the last days of her life, she was not even that far away. She was right under my nose. And why didn't I know? Why couldn't I know? She was there, and why couldn't I have found her? And why couldn't I have gotten a hold of that recovery center with enough time to find her? And I was just wrestling so much with the what ifs, and what I eventually had to come to a place to in my therapy was there was nothing I could have done to prevent her from passing away. I was, in a way, blaming myself for not getting to her fast enough, but it was frustrating. I mean, if you think about it, I'm actively looking for her. Right before we got that phone call, I had gotten a hold of this recovery center and found out that they had put her on a bus. And I was like, oh my gosh, I felt close to finding her. And then I got this devastating call that she had passed away. And I was reckoning with this. Like, I was so close to her. I was so close. Like, I almost found her. It was so hard for me to come to terms with the fact that, like, she was in reach, and I couldn't find her. And now she's not here. And I obviously don't carry that with me. I know that, and trust in the sovereignty of my God and his plans. And I'm comfortable sitting in the reality that this place that we live is completely wrecked by sin and grief. But I can't help to see a bit of a parallel. And part of me, don't go too far into this because I don't know at what point it would break down, but I think about how God pursues us even more so than I pursued my aunt at the end of her life, and how much more he knows and loves us and pursues us. And I think about the fact that if we were to leave this earth without knowing him, how that would pain him so much. And I know, I've heard a lot of atheists say, have this view of God that's very, God's so exclusive, and, it's almost like he wants you to not go to heaven or accept him because of all the quote unquote parameters that are placed on heaven. But the only parameter placed on heaven is having faith in him and a relationship with him. And if I were able in some way to save my aunt's life, if I were able to, which I don't believe I was able to, but if I were able to, all I would have needed was contact. All I would have needed was to make contact, and everything would have been different. And Jesus is different from me in that he can save your life. And all he needs is contact. All he needs is contact. All he needs is for you to turn around and say to him, like, I need you. And obviously, I don't get to see my aunt again on this side of heaven, but I believe that she did have a relationship with the Lord. And actually, shortly after she passed away, I had the realest dream I think I've ever had. And I've had a few dreams that I would say are like prophetic in nature, where I woke up and knew without a doubt that the Lord was speaking to me in that dream. But I had a dream, and I was basically in my dream like transported to heaven, and I couldn't figure out why I was there. And I was looking around, and there was just a bunch of, it was like beautiful. It was like, it looked like creation, like this earth, but it was beautiful and new and more vibrant, and the greens were more green, and the blue sky was more blue than I had ever seen it before. It was just so beautiful. And there were people like completely clothed in white. All the people were clothed in white, and everyone was like full of joy. Like it was just joyful joy, like a sea of joyful people. And they were like jumping and like, yeah, like just so happy and completely like wrapped up in their joy. And I'll never forget it. All of a sudden, a clearing through this crowd, and I saw my aunt, also clothed in white, jumping and rejoicing And the smile on her face was such a familiar smile, not the smile of, her illness, but like her true smile. And she didn't notice me because she was so in the presence of her Lord. And all of a sudden, she broke for a minute that completely being enthralled and in the presence of the Lord, and looked through the crowd, and we locked eyes, and it was like it pierced me when I looked. It was like I had really seen her. And instantly when she looked at me, I woke up and wept, because I feel like the Lord was telling me she's safe and she's okay and she's with me. That gave me so much peace to know that. And I don't really know how to wrap this up other than to say that I hope you're blessed to know that Jesus is in pursuit of you, and he's in pursuit of every single person living and breathing on this planet. And my prayer is that if you haven't already, that you would turn around and you would see his face full of love, with tears of joy in his eyes, and you would open your arms to receive his embrace and the gift of a life-changing, life-saving relationship with him.